Enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump over to Matthew 5 through 7. Okay, now I'm just trying to think review wise. What were we in Matthew 4? If I go down here, it should let me head back to Matthew 4. Yeah, so I thought. Yeah, Spirit led away into the wilderness. Um, and so the temptation of Jesus. So we are now going to follow up with after the temptation, where Jesus is at, what Jesus is doing. And again, this is Matthew's gospel. And as we go through the gospels, each of the gospel writers has a specific intent as they tell the story. And so you might wonder at times, well, Mark or Luke or John seems to have a different order to the way that events happened. There are a couple of possibilities. I'll give you one is, for instance, in John, there are two times that the story of the money changers is told. Is the possibility that he did it at the beginning of his ministry and then again at the end of his ministry. That's one possibility. So when we see stories at different times, there's the possibility that he did something more than once. That certainly could happen. If you think um, about anyone going around from town to town, they often tell the same stories, or a comedian's going to tell the same jokes, a singer's going to sing the same songs, a pastor's going to give the same message from town to town to town. So there is a possibility that some of these things happened more than once and more than one occasion. There's also the possibility that they're telling them in a different order because they want to build something up. They're not doing it to deceive. Their idea of telling what happened is not as bound in as our sense of things are to chronology. We're a modern Western thinking people that think history and chronology are synonymous and tied together, and that's not an ancient way of thinking about things. So all that to be said, that as we go through, if you think that something's in a different order than a different gospel as we're going along, you might be right. Is it significant? It could be. Is it false? No, that doesn't make it false in any way. That's not the intent of any of these. They are to convey the good news. They are not to convey a historical, linear, accurate, detailed accounting of events. That's not what they're setting out to do. So any thoughts that they're inaccurate in that way would be not what they're intending to try to do. If you want to say, well, some of these may or may not have happened historically, that's a separate issue and one I'm not going to even um, worry about or get into. All right, enough said about that, I guess. So let's get into it. So Matthew 5. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. All right, so I don't want to do a sermon, so I don't want to dig into each one of these separately and figure out some of that is in there. But suffice it to say, what we have here is information that is contrary to society. That's clear. Uh, those who mourn, very few in society think that they're blessed. Those who are meek, we don't think they're blessed. Those who are merciful, we don't think they're blessed. No, those are the ones we make fun of. Those are the ones that are cursed and ridiculed. And what does he say down here at the bottom? Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you, with the caveat, because of me. So he's laying out the kingdom of heaven, and it is different than what we think it should be. It is different than what the world is looking for. It is different, in fact, than the religious leaders think it is, because they know the law and the prophets. And so this would not be their thinking about how the kingdom of God is. And Jesus is starting out in Matthew's gospel by teaching about the kingdom of God, which is different than we think. Now, he also continues after talking about what we refer to as the Beatitudes. He says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." I, I'm not really sure how salt loses its saltiness. I do know that at times salt clumps together and it can become hard to put it on your stuff. So maybe something similar like that. It's become unusable. And yeah, what do? You throw it out and you trample underfoot. I'm gonna probably go out today and throw some salt on my driveway to get rid of some ice. So yeah, it's good for something else besides food, but it's not good for much at all. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works, your good deeds, and glorify your Father in heaven. And there you can see I have it memorized. And so I sometimes say the wrong words that are different than what are written. In both of these two illustrations, I recently heard a pastor talking about this was said not to Gentiles, but Jesus is speaking to a Jewish audience. And if we go back to the Abrahamic covenant, there is a piece in which they are supposed to be the ones who draw the Gentiles into the kingdom. They are the ones who are supposed to do that. Now, they didn't understand that fully. They didn't go and try to do that completely. So there's that. And so here um, we can see it as they're missing the mark. They're not doing what they're supposed to by bringing the kingdom in. But there's also, he's teaching his disciples, and we, as the recipients of that teaching, it still applies to us. So I think the point that the pastor I was listening to was making a point that it was specifically for the Jews and how they were supposed to do this towards the Gentiles, and they didn't do that. However, even so, I still think it's applicable to all of us today. So, yeah, let's continue. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the least stroke of the pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so a warning there. And a clarification. So the warning is here at the end that if you're trying to get in by following the law, you've got to be better than the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. You've got to be more righteous than them in accordance with the law, and they aren't, and you won't be able to. So you can't get into the kingdom of heaven by following the law. So there's that at the end. But there's also this declaration that what Jesus has come to do is not to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill it. And so then now we have the argument going forward. Is the first coming a full fulfillment of the law a partial fulfillment of the law. I'm not going to get into that here, but that's one of the things that we do as Christians debate. Uh, but there clearly is in the first coming, in his obedience to all of the things that he does, in the miracles that he performs, in the words that he proclaims, in going to the cross, in his death, burial, resurrection, and then ascension, a fulfillment of the law and the prophets. It's just a matter of, do we think that he fulfilled everything or not? And here's one caveat: even if you think he has fulfilled everything, um, there still can be additional fulfillments in the future. So you can have multiple fulfillments of certain things. So if we were to look at the flood is one thing, and we're just looked at that. And I think when we get into Genesis, we'll be just finishing up on the flood. Uh, there is a promise within there. Then there's also the passing through the Red Sea, saving through water once again. So there's the saving of the world through the flood. There's the saving of the people through the Red Sea. Then there is the passing the Jordan River. We've looked at that. So there is another one. And then you have the waters of baptism. So you have continuing fulfillments of that first promise in some respects, and a continuation and a repetition. So that's what I'm getting at when I say you can say that yes, everything was fulfilled in Jesus, and still hold to future fulfillment of some of those same things. So just wanted to make that clarification on how that could be the case. So, but let's keep going. You have heard that it was said to people long ago. Oh, we're getting into the you have heard it said long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable in court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fires of hell. Um, I'm not going to take time on these. We'll get really sidetracked. I just want to point out what Jesus is doing is taking common phrases based in the law, and he is saying the intent and motivation is what's more important than the letter of the law. Um, Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, notice not you have something against them. Leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge. The judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown in prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid every last penny. That would have been debtor's prison. We don't do that anymore, but still the same thing can apply. Settle matters is good advice from Jesus. You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. I'll just pause for a minute to say one of the difficulties with people who think that there's only one way to read the Bible, and that is to take everything literally. You need to then take this literally as well and gouge out your eye and cut off your hand. I don't think that there's any thought that Jesus was telling people, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say it. Surprised we don't see eyeless, limbless people everywhere. No, I don't think Jesus intended that to be literal in any way. So, hey, Alice, thanks for jumping in here. In fact, the church in the early centuries, and I repeatedly talked about this is not intended for you to go and literally gouge out your eyes and cut off your hands. That's not what Jesus is talking about. He is talking about the severity of how seriously he thinks that lustfulness is. Not just waiting until you've fully come to the end of it and actually committed adultery. All of the preceding steps that are there are just as damnable as that act that starts the whole process. And so that's the point of what he's trying to make there. Is you'd be better off if you didn't have your eyes, if lusting is a problem, and if stealing is a problem, or touching things, or grabbing whatever, you'd be better off without a hand. So you need to control that, not literally get rid of it. It's a, get it under control. Do what you have to, so that temptation is not something that you are prone to and doing. So anyway, yeah, if we're going to take a while today, I think, to get through here. So thanks to Alex for jumping in, and good comment there. Yeah, because I don't advocate that. I don't know anyone who has. I have heard it on occasion advocated. In fact, I think I recall um, a case in Texas of a man who was in prison, who ended up taking this passage literally to address some. I don't want to go into the details, but that's the only time I've really heard it. Was one case in Texas about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, whatever that was. So we'll continue, because users have got more of these. You've heard it said. So it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you, anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven or, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even your own hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. This is always one of those that I'm just kind of a little bit baffled in regards to, but I can get to the point. We don't necessarily use these ones, so you kind of have to insert. I swear on my mother's grave is probably one I've heard, or I swear on my mother's life. Those kinds of things. That it's the severity of wishing someone dead or harm. So I obviously I'm not lying if I tell you this. And Jesus is saying, no, that's not a good thing. Um, you need to be a person whose value is such that your yes means yes and your no means no, and any of those other things are not beneficial in regards to that at all. But enough about that. Again, he's still got more of these. You've heard it said. You've heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. A little bit of cultural things in here. Roman soldiers could force someone to carry their stuff for 1 mile. He's saying, do 2. Volunteer after what you're forced to do. And give to anyone who asks. Do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. If you had the capacity to loan to someone, you were supposed to do that. In the 7th year, all loans were supposed to be forgiven. Often what was happening is in the 5th, the 6th year, people wouldn't loan money because they knew they had to forgive it and the person wouldn't be able to pay it back. So they wouldn't do that. And Jesus is saying, do that. The first part of someone slaps you on the cheek, turn to the other. If anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt, hand them your coat as well. Uh, some of that has been taken. Um, I don't want to say necessarily out of context. I don't want to say it that way, but it has been taken to be understood by some denominations and some Christians throughout time that that means you should never be in the military. Here it says if someone hits you on the cheek, turn the other one, and if anyone wants to sue you, if he forces you out, these are all passive things, and therefore we should be pacifist. We should never raise our hands against someone else. If this was the only passage we had in regard to that, I would say maybe you're correct. There's other passages, and like I said, I don't want to get into that and get sidetracked, but I just wanted to point out if you've ever wondered where people get the idea of pacifist and being a pacifist, here's one passage that gives people that thought to lead in that direction. I think the whole of it, however, is the repaying vengeance piece that starts with the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. That's the vengeance piece that Jesus is teaching against. So um, I might argue that it's not really about pacifism, but I understand how you can see that. There's also the when you're asked for something, don't judge people based on their ability to repay you. If you're getting sued, yeah, go ahead and pay what's due. He already said that one earlier. So we'll keep going here. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and he sends the rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. I I love this passage. Because one of the things that I think Jesus lays out in here is, first the contradiction, love your neighbor, hate your enemies. That's what the world's going to tell you. Um, but he says, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I don't believe you can actually pray with a heartfelt, fervent nature and say, I want the best for this person who is my adversary, God. I don't think you can do that and then turn around, or I should say, and have meant that, and then turn around and curse that person to their face. I don't think you can do that honestly. You become divided, and so I think that the practice of praying for your enemies um, changes your heart towards them, and that is how you become perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. So I think Jesus gives us the manner and way in which we can do this. Uh, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm also going to say, I bet at times you're going to say, I don't know what to pray for my enemies. So you start simple. God, I know this person is my enemy, either by their choice or my choice. I'm asking you to bless them and to break down the walls and barriers between us. Nothing specific. Start with generic. If you learn anything, like for instance, they're sick, pray for their health. So you can become specific. You can start small. You can grow in that regard. But I think this is one of the most fantastic teachings in all of this, and I think in some regards it's probably overlooked. Well, partly because of the breadth of everything here in the Sermon on the Mount, and we're only through one chapter. We've got more to cover today, so let's keep going. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And I was going to give examples of how people do that. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Again, if we're looking at literal, how could your left hand not know what your right hand is doing? Your hand doesn't know what it's doing, period. Your brain is controlling. So there can't be actually a separation of that. But the illustration is there to help us see how privately we should be doing things. Now, they would have had, it's announced with trumpets, a collection device that you would throw the money into and it would make noise. There wasn't paper money. So all these coins are going to make money and or make noise when you throw them in. So he's saying you need to do it quietly. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't let people know how much you put in there. You can clearly let people know how much you're putting in there. I mean, if you've ever seen offering plates, they often have a little pad at the bottom of it, and that's to kind of quiet it. But we also have bills, so that quiets it. But think about if you had $20, you put a bill in, makes no noise. You have $20 in quarters, you drop those in a plate that's all metal. It's going to make some noise. So you can draw attention to yourself if you chose to. That was what people were doing, and he's pointing out the hypocrisy of that. You're getting your reward of people thinking, wow, they gave a lot. And then there's no actual reward from God for doing that. So he continues with another example. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. All right, before we read through the Lord's Prayer, two pieces there. One, well, I guess presupposition to that. There was no thought of silent prayer in the first century. All prayer was verbal. There was no power in words that were not spoken. That doesn't mean you couldn't whisper when you were praying. You certainly could. So you're not drawing attention to yourself if you're praying quietly. However, if you're shouting on the street corner, you're drawing attention to yourself. And that's what the hypocrites, the Pharisees, they like to do. They like the attention of people saying, wow, look how holy that person is. They're praying right now. Yep. But he says, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who's unseen. This is a cultural reference that we totally miss most of the time. People say, well, I need a prayer closet because this passage says, go into your room, close the door, and pray in secret. It's not what Jesus is saying. That's a misunderstanding of what's happening in the culture. That's also, I'll just point out, contrary to what Daniel does. So Daniel is doing something contrary to that in a culture that, you know, he gets. I'm not going to get into the Daniel thing, but just pointing that out. Daniel prays. How do they know he prays? Because he has to pray out loud. There's no silent prayer. What Jesus is talking about, if you've ever seen people at the Wailing Wall, they have prayer shawls that are over them. They've got tassels on the end of them, and your inner room. I don't have one with me. I wasn't planning on doing this. You would take the prayer shawls, take the ends of them in your hands, and you would go like this up over your head, wrapping the shawl around you. Now close the door. No one can see you. You're in your inner room and you're praying to the Father and you're in your prayer room. That's what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about in your house, away from the public square, because there were times you were supposed to pray in the public square. What he's saying is, don't draw attention to yourself. Just keep it private. Do what you're supposed to. Lift your hands to God. Close it up so nobody else can see you. Maybe lower your voice. He doesn't say that, but maybe lower your voice. You're not drawing attention. You've got a cloak over you. No one can look and see, and you just pray to Father in heaven. That's what he's saying. Don't be looking for the attention that people get from it. So he's pointing out the Jewish way. Then he points out pagans do it differently. They keep babbling. If we went back to the battle between the prophets of Baal and Elijah, we see they keep going on. And what is he taunts them? Says maybe he's asleep. Maybe he's on the commode. Maybe he's out of the room. Maybe he's in a foreign country. Maybe you need to shout louder and you got to keep talking. And so they keep going on and on and on. The Yeah, you sometimes need to say it, more times. Maybe you need to say it again and again and again. They just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on. He says, don't do it that way. Here then is how you should pray. Now, one of the things I think, perhaps unfortunately, that we do is only just pray this. However, there's a piece at which it's easy corporately to have a prayer that we all know and can all say. So I think there's value in that. But in the fact that sometimes this only becomes repetition and it only becomes part of what we do and we don't think about it when we say we're falling into what Jesus is saying not to do. So I'm just giving that kind of caveat. So then this is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So acknowledging the Father and his glory and power. Give us today our daily bread. Ask for what you need. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Um, this is honoring and saying what we know God does. Help us to do it for others as well. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. So, does God lead us into temptation? Well, that's not really what this is saying. It's really saying, help us um, and deliver us. So it's a two things back to back are connected. Um, So there's I don't want to say a formula. There's a pattern here to follow. That's the intent of this. Then there's also explanation of why some of the things are in there. For if we forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. I don't think we focus on that enough. I think we just think we need to be forgiven and we have been forgiven and I don't need to forgive others. That's not what this says. It says, if you forgive other people, your heavenly Father will forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. There's contingency here. Your forgiveness is based on your forgiving nature. Your lack of forgiving others is going to result in a lack of forgiveness towards you. Yeah, think about that for a minute. Now, I love this next section, so I'm going to try to not get sidetracked. If somebody is interested in this, um, I'll do a whole nother video on this at some point. So, but I noticed two things that happen here. Jesus said, "Oh, this one is not here. This says this is how you should pray." I thought it would say it must be in one of the other. Oh yeah, and when you pray, here it is. When you pray, Jesus assumes that you're going to pray. There he says, "When you fast," Jesus assumes you're going to fast. Um, in the first century, good assumption. Uh, Throughout church history, good assumption. In modern Western society, a few denominations, maybe a good assumption. In most, not a good assumption at all. I'm going to disagree with Jesus and say when you fast. I'm going to say if you fast, if you fast, and rather you need to learn this and begin doing it if you've never done it. And so I won't go into that more. I'll get sidetracked and we'll be here for some time. Like I said, I should probably do a video on that at some point. Um, but we have no time for that today. Do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their face to show others they are fasting. Again, motivation, which we've looked at before. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, this does seem perhaps contrary to the putting on sackcloth and ashes and fasting that would have went along with that. Um, that is often done in a corporate nature, and so you were outwardly showing that to talk about or to reflect inward things. sackcloth and ashes isn't always fasting. So this isn't a repudiation of that practice. It's the regular weekly fasting practice that Jesus is addressing here, not the mourning, grieving, sackcloth and ashes type of thing. He continues, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So he is summarizing what people do, their motivation, and you're motivated to have rewards here or you're motivated to have rewards in heaven. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Trying to think. Yeah, we earlier he talks about you're the light of the world, and letting your light or being a lamp on a lamp stand, light on a lampstand. So I think a reference back to that and a reference to darkness. There's several other places we could go, but we have no time for that. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So he's still referencing motivations and where your treasure is. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about the body, what you will wear. Don't worry about being dapper. Is your life not more than food, and your body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than they? Okay, in Greek, there are questions that have built-in answers, and this is going to be one of those that has the built-in answer, yes. We don't need to know that. In English, we can figure it out too, but Greek has it very specific that there is a built-in answer to this question. Can anyone of you, by worrying, add a single hour to their life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the fields, which are here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek ye first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Again, so he's bringing back here when he was talking about prayer, your heavenly Father knows what you need before you ask. He said that up here in 8, and now he's gone through a bunch of things and he brings that back. You don't need to worry about things. Your heavenly Father knows what you need before you ask. I love using this example, so if you've heard it before, I apologize. I love to have shoes for my kids. I see them in clearance. I know what size they have. I know what brands they like. And I'm thinking just specifically tennis shoes because I want them to have their feet with the best shoes that I can provide for them. So I would go in the clearance, see them in clearance, buy them, store them in my closet, and they're there. I might see that my kids, this is as they become teenagers and afterwards, not when they were younger kids. So I would see they probably need a new pair of shoes. I had new pairs of shoes waiting for them. I knew what they needed. I had what they needed. You know what I was doing? I was waiting for them to ask.
they finally, I think, figured this out. But I would just be waiting for them to say, Dad, I need a new pair of shoes. Great. Let me go get them for you. What? Yeah, I already have them. I knew you were in need of them. I was simply waiting for you to ask. As soon as you asked, I have them. I'm ready. Here they are. Here's your new shoes. And God's the same way. He knows those things that we're going to need for daily life. Not this isn't talking about the luxuries. I mean, certainly he would know the things that we desire would be luxuries for us that we would like, and those too he might provide. But this is specifically thinking about those things that he knows that we need. And why should we worry about what we should eat or what we should drink? He takes care of the birds. He takes care of the flowers and he will take care of us, and we're more valuable than birds and flowers in the kingdom. So, sorry for the aside there, but just like I said, I like sharing that. So, we're not done with this sermon yet. We're going to keep going. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time you have a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eyes. Okay, some people take that first part that says, do not judge or you too will be judged. That means Christians shouldn't judge people. Well, there's other passages that say otherwise in other regards, so I just want to point that out. I'm not going to spend time on it. The point here is the hypocrisy that we often have when we judge. We often judge people thinking that we're superior to them when we, in fact, have bigger flaws that we need to deal with than the thing that we're pointing out to them. And so I think that's what Jesus is pointing out. He says, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they will be trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. This one's a little bit more difficult at times, but it's a matter of understanding and wisdom. I mean, yeah, throwing pearls to pigs, this seems like a silly thing. Give to the dogs what's sacred. The Gentiles are referred to as dogs, so there's certainly a cultural reference in there. However, there are times that we need to know when to do things and when not to do things and use wisdoms. And I think that's part of what uh, is happening here. We could dive into that more, but that would take a while. So ask and it will be given you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks, receive, and everyone who seeks, finds, and everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your sons ask for bread, will give them a stone? And if you ask for a fish, will give them a steak? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. Okay, so he jumps back to the giving there and to your children, and the Father has and knows what you need beforehand. And he uses all of this to say, in every way, do to others as you would have them do to you. This is referred to as the golden rule. I've recently heard people talk about how this is not a good thing. The golden rule is actually selfish because it's do to others as you would have them do to you, not as they want to have done to them. Well, to me, that's just silliness and pettiness and misunderstanding. If you would want someone to do to you what you would want have done to you, then by doing to someone else, you would want to do to them what they want done to them. We don't need to recreate this and say this another way to get it to this level that people are calling the platinum rule or the diamond rule, which is do to others what they want to have done to them. That's what he said. That's the understanding here. So anyway, also he was talking about loving enemies earlier. That's revisited here in some way. Uh, so, yeah, we'll keep going. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. So Jesus is getting some warnings here, warning for us on how we can recognize people, and then he's going to get into the end of things and how um, people are recognized. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoer. This is, in some ways, kind of a scary thought. But notice too, not the outcome of it, but the motivation for what they're saying. Many will come to me and say, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and in your name drive out? It's the look what we did. That's the problem. We did it. What's he doing all the way through here? He's talking about the hypocrites who are doing things for their own benefit. And still, he's pointing out that some will do things in Jesus' name for their own benefit. They're not doing it for the kingdom. They're not doing it because of Jesus. They're doing it for themselves. They're even prophesying. That's declaring the truth, not predicting the future. Don't just think that. Uh, Driving out demons and performing miracles. And Jesus says, Get away from me, evildoers. Yeah, you used my name. Yeah, but why did you do it? You did it for yourself. You weren't doing it because you wanted to bless the kingdom. You weren't doing it because you wanted to glorify God. You weren't doing it because you wanted to be connected to me. You did it because you wanted some glory for yourself. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built a house on the sand. The rain came down, the stream rose, the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. All right, so he concludes um, with a what we refer to as the parable of the wise man and the foolish man. But notice where this fits in this whole thing. He starts with the Beatitudes and talks about the blessing. He's taking and turning all of the knowledge of the world on its head. The understanding of what it takes to be blessed and what it takes to be get ahead, so to speak. He talks about how we should be living as salt and as light, and then he talks about the law. He talks about things that people have or should be doing to live out uh, the truth of it before he even gets to saying and summarizing the law and the prophets. He's laying out some of the law and the prophets along the way. He's then saying all of these things that you've heard, some are going to be in the law, some are going to be an addition to the law. but he's talking about what you've heard, and I'm telling you, it's the motivation underneath it, not the letter of the law. He goes through those. Uh, then he talks about the motivation for good deeds and what's happening there. He talks about how we should pray. He's going on. He talks about fasting. He's talking about where our intended motivations are. Do we want treasures on earth or in heaven? And then he's talking about, do we need to worry about things? No, our Father knows what we need. Talking about how we treat other people. And finally, he's talking, gets to there's, yeah, the law and the prophets are to love others as ourselves. Talks about false prophets, people that do things with false motivation. He talks about what we should be doing. We should be putting his words into practice. That's the point here. When he gets done, though, because of the truth of what he's saying, the crowds are amazed because he teaches as one with authority and not like the teachers of the law. What did he do? He took the teachings of the law, he flipped them on their head. Why? Because he understood that they weren't fully being understood and fully put into practice. And those that were teaching them were only doing it for selfish motivation or for praise or whatever it was. They weren't trying to honor God with their actions. They weren't trying to uh, please God. They were trying to get self glory and self worth and value of their own to use now and here. And so his first sermon challenges all of that, challenges cultural norms, challenges the religious leaders, but it points to how to live simply. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Pray for your enemies. Bless and do not curse. All these things, whether they're in this version or in other versions, are all contained within this great sermon that he had. So yeah, that's a whole lot here in Matthew. And again, if we're looking here,